What if I told you that the most ruthless political strategist in history accidentally discovered the secret behind God's silence? 1513, Florence, Italy. Niccolo Machiavelli sits in exile, writing words that would change how we understand power forever. But buried in chapter 25 of The Prince is a warning so profound it explains why your prayers feel unanswered, why breakthrough seems delayed, and why the Almighty operates on what appears to be divine procrastination. By the end of this video, you'll understand why God's delays aren't denials. They're the most sophisticated power moves in existence. And more importantly, you'll learn how to apply this ancient strategic wisdom to transform your career, relationships, and life decisions starting today. Because what Machiavelli discovered about premature power plays, it's why kings fall, empires crumble, and prayers get answered in God's timing, not yours. Picture this. You're Cesare Borgia, the most feared man in Renaissance Italy. You have armies, wealth, political connections through your father, the Pope. You're unstoppable until you're not. Machiavelli watched Cesare make the fatal mistake that destroys every ruler who attempts it. He called it the premature revelation of force. And it's the same mistake you make every time you show your hand too early. Here's what Machiavelli wrote, and listen carefully because this changes everything. He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. Translation: the moment you act on what you think should happen instead of what is actually happening, you've signed your own defeat. But Machiavelli discovered something even more dangerous than acting too early. He discovered that the greatest rulers, the ones who built empires that lasted centuries, they all had one thing in common. They mastered the art of strategic waiting. See, Machiavelli noticed that unsuccessful rulers always made the same mistake. They confused urgency with importance. They mistook their desire for action with the right time for action. But the successful ones? They understood something profound about power. The person who controls the timing controls the outcome. And that's when it hit me. What if God operates on Machiavellian principles? Think about it. Every major biblical figure faced the same pattern. A promise followed by decades of silence.
Abraham promised a son at 75. Isaac arrives when he's 100. 25 years of waiting.
Moses, called to leadership, then spends 40 years in the wilderness before he's ready. David, anointed as king as a teenager, doesn't take the throne until he's 30. Jesus himself, 30 years of preparation for 3 years of ministry. What if this isn't divine procrastination? What if this is divine strategy? Let me show you what I mean. David could have killed Saul twice. He had the opportunity, the justification, even the encouragement from his men, but he didn't. Why? Because David understood something Machiavelli would write about 1,500 years later. Premature power plays don't just fail. They destroy your credibility for when the real moment arrives. If David had killed Saul, he would have been seen as a usurper, a murderer, a throne stealer. Instead, he waited until the kingdom begged him to take power. That's not passivity, that's strategic genius. And God was building something in David during those running for his life years that no crown could teach him. Character that could handle absolute power without being corrupted by it. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, but both are difficult to achieve together." But David achieved both. How? Because he earned his position through strategic patience, not political maneuvering. So, when you're praying for that breakthrough, that promotion, that relationship, that financial blessing, and God seems silent, what if he's not ignoring you? What if he's applying the most sophisticated timing strategy in existence? What if he's waiting because you showing up too early would actually hurt you? Let me break down the Machiavellian principles that govern divine timing. Because understanding this will change how you pray, how you plan, and how you pursue your goals. First principle, information warfare. Machiavelli said, "Never act until you have complete intelligence." God doesn't answer your prayer for marriage until he knows who you're supposed to marry. He doesn't open the business opportunity until he knows the market conditions that will make you succeed. I know someone who prayed for 3 years to leave their job. 3 years. They thought God wasn't listening. Then COVID hit, their company downsized, they got a severance package, and immediately landed their dream job at double the salary. God wasn't late. He was perfectly positioned. Second position, opposition exhaustion. Machiavelli taught that sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemies defeat themselves. God often waits until your opposition runs out of steam. The Israelites at the Red Sea. They could have fought Pharaoh's army and maybe won, but God waited until they were completely trapped, then demonstrated his power so completely that the story is still being told 3,000 years later. Third principle, character preparation. This is the one most people miss. Machiavelli observed that unprepared leaders always fall, even when they get the position they want. God isn't withholding your blessing because he's mean. He's withholding it because getting it too early would destroy you. The person you are today might not be able to handle the life you are praying for tomorrow. But here's where most people mess this up. They don't recognize when they're making premature power plays in their own lives. You've been in your job for 6 months and you're already asking for a promotion. You think you deserve it because you have the skills, but you haven't built the relationships, haven't proven your value over time, haven't demonstrated that you can handle pressure. Machiavelli would say you're revealing your ambition before establishing your competence. Your boss isn't saying no because they don't like you. They're saying no because you haven't made yourself indispensable yet. 3 weeks into dating someone and you're talking about moving in together. You think it's love, but what you're actually doing is forcing intimacy before trust is established. Machiavelli understood that sustainable power comes from gradual influence, not sudden conquest. The same principle applies to hearts. You get a small windfall and immediately want to quit your job to start a business. You haven't tested the market, haven't built a client base, haven't saved enough runway capital. That's not faith. That's financial suicide with a spiritual excuse. Look, I'm not saying don't take risks. I'm saying take calculated risks at the right time with the right preparation. So, how do you apply Machiavellian timing to your actual life? How do you know when to wait and when to act? I'm going to give you the same framework that built empires and answers prayers. Before you make any major move, Ask these questions. What information am I missing? Who else is involved that I need to understand? What are the potential unintended consequences? What would this look like if I waited 6 months? Want to ask for a raise? Don't just prepare your argument. Research what your boss is facing, what the company's financial situation is, what your replacement would cost them. That's not manipulation, that's intelligence. Honestly evaluate. Are you ready for what you're asking for? If you got that promotion tomorrow, you have the leadership skills to handle it? If you met your ideal partner next week, are you emotionally healthy enough to build something lasting? If your business idea succeeded immediately, do you have the systems to scale it? Sometimes God's no is actually not yet, and the delay is His gift to you. Machiavelli taught that you should understand your opposition better than they understand themselves. This doesn't mean being paranoid, it means being prepared. If you're trying to change something at work, understand why people might resist. If you're pursuing someone romantically, understand what their concerns might be. If you're launching something new, understand what could go wrong. The goal isn't to manipulate, it's to address real concerns before they become obstacles. But here's what Machiavelli also understood. There comes a moment when waiting becomes more dangerous than acting. Esther faced this moment. Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. The preparation phase was over. The intelligence was gathered. The character was tested. Now was the time to act.
How do you recognize your Esther moment? First, your preparation feels complete. Not just your desire feels strong. Second, external circumstances align with your internal readiness. Third, the cost of waiting has become higher than the risk of acting. Fourth, you have peace about both success and failure. I waited 2 years to start this channel. 2 years. People thought I was procrastinating, but I was preparing. I was studying, learning, building content, understanding the platform. When I finally launched, I wasn't hoping it would work. I knew it would work because I had done the work. And you know what? That's when prayers get answered. Not when you're desperate and demanding, but when you're prepared and positioned. God doesn't respond to your timeline. He responds to your readiness. So, what changes when you start thinking like this? Your prayers change. Instead of, God, why is this taking so long? You start praying, God, what are you preparing me for? Instead of demanding answers, you're seeking wisdom. Your decisions change. You stop making moves based on emotion and start making moves based on strategy. You stop forcing doors and start preparing for the ones that will open naturally. Your peace changes. Waiting stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like preparation. Delays stop feeling like denials and start feeling like divine positioning. Your power changes. You develop the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do at exactly the right time. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop desperately trying to force your breakthrough, that's often when your breakthrough comes. Because Machiavelli understood something profound about power. The person who needs it least is often the person most ready to handle it. So here's your challenge. I want you to identify one area of your life where you've been pushing too hard, forcing too much, demanding too loudly. Maybe it's a relationship you're trying to force. Maybe it's a career move you're rushing. Maybe it's a prayer you've been demanding God answer on your timeline. For the next 30 days, I want you to shift from pushing to preparing. Ask yourself,
What skills can I develop during this waiting period? What character issues can I address? What strategic advantages can I build? How can I position myself for when the right time comes? And I promise you this: when you align your timing with strategic wisdom, when you let God's Machiavellian patience teach you His divine strategy, your life will change in ways you never expected. Because the same God who waited until the fullness of time to send Jesus is the same God who's waiting for the fullness of time to release your breakthrough. The question isn't whether God will act. The question is, will you be ready when He does? If this video shifted your perspective on divine timing, hit that like button. Subscribe for more content that bridges ancient wisdom with modern life. And in the comments, tell me, what are you learning to wait for strategically? Remember, God's delays aren't God's denials. They're God's perfect strategy.